Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Karen and I took December off because if you're not aware, it gets a little busy around the church in the month of December. So we decided to take a few weeks off through Advent, but we're back and we're starting a new series that I'm very excited about, and it's the Great Women of the Bible. So we're going to be going through some Old Testament women from now until the beginning of Lent, which will be a lot of fun to work through. I'm joined, as always, by Pastor Karen Sadbury from Community Church of Ocean Pines. She's the associate pastor up there. And I actually consider her a great woman of the faith, too. So it's really going to be interesting to go through this with her perspective. And just like Hannah, she never gives up. So here she is pretending to be retired. And I'm grateful that she doesn't know how to do that. So, Karen, I know that we're kicking this off with Samuel 1 through 11, and you're going to go ahead and read that and lay it all out. I want to start by saying thank you for taking the hard part with all the hard words that go along with some of the Old Testament genealogies. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Certainly. Now there was a certain man from Ramathaim, a Zuphite from the highlands of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah. He was from the tribe of Ephraim, and he was the son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph. Elkanah had two wives, one named Hannah and the other named Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah didn't. Every year this man would leave his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of heavenly forces in Shiloh, where Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were the Lord's priests. Wherever he sacrificed, Elkanah would give parts of the sacrifice to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But he would give only one part of it to Hannah, though he loved her, because the Lord had kept her from conceiving. And because the Lord had kept Hannah from conceiving, her rival would make fun of her mercilessly, just to bother her. So that is what took place year after year. Whenever Hannah went to the Lord's house, Peninnah would make fun of her. Then she would cry and wouldn't eat anything. "Hannah, why are you crying?" her husband Elkanah would say to her. "Why won't you eat? Why are you so sad? Aren't I worth more to you than 10 sons? One time, after eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah got up and presented herself before the Lord. Now Eli the priest was sitting in the chair by the doorpost of the Lord's temple. Hannah was very upset and couldn't stop crying as she prayed to the Lord. Then she made this promise: "Lord of heavenly forces, just look at your servant's pain and remember me. Don't forget your servant. Give her a boy. Then I'll give him to the Lord for his entire life. No razor will ever touch his head."
So many people don't understand why the genealogies are there. And so maybe we should start there. And I'm not going to go into the genealogy of our dear friend Elkanah, but maybe just talk about why they're in there. And it's because as Jewish people, where they came from, it was very important to who they were in the community. So by putting that out there, just so everybody knows, we're kind of laying out who this family is and the importance that they have inside of the Jewish community. So I just wanted to put that out there because I know so many times you hear these genealogies in church and you're like, why do I care? Right. So sometimes it's good to know why we care because it kind of lays some things out for us.
This sets it up, though, really well because, any of us who really think about a polygamous marriage think about the conflict between the wives. We think about how hard it would be. And here it seems as though Elkanah knew. He was a smart man. And he kept these wives separate except when they went to go and worship. Because it says that the conflict only happens when they go to worship. So apparently in their day-to-day lives, they have their own space. They can coexist because they don't see each other. But when they come together, that's when Peninnah starts to lord it over Hannah. And we also see this attitude, which has hurt a lot of women, even in modern times, that God did not want Hannah to conceive, that God was the reason that she had no children. And Elkanah is just clueless. Aren't I worth more to you than 10 sons? He feels for her, but he just doesn't understand how miserable she is.
Right. Right. He really doesn't. And one would have to even question, given the time. I mean, unfortunately, some of it you just have to be real is did he
Mhm.
care? Right?
Right.
Because in some cases, unfortunate as it is, that's a woman's problem,
Mhm.
you know, which isn't right under any stretch of the imagination, but here you are, you know?
Mhm. He might even have seen her as ungrateful.
Oh, I had never thought of it that way. What what I will say that I find funny is that uh, in many men's groups, and it happens in our Wednesday night Bible study here at church, anytime you run into men of the Bible who have multiple wives and talk about the problem of multiple wives, especially Solomon, we're like, he wasn't that wise, was he? Right?
No.
So, uh, the one other thing I wanted to point out about this with Hannah and Peninnah is that some of the Jewish scholars say that the order of the marriages is interesting because Hannah comes first.
Mhm.
And so her womb's closed. And there's, if you read some of the Jewish writings, they talk about Hannah may have actually encouraged Elkanah to take Peninnah as a
Mhm.
second wife because of what happened with Abraham and Sarah. Like, and just seeing as
Mhm.
like this is the way you get God's honor by humbling yourself, saying, let someone else have that spot. Right. So she may have actually created her own challenging situation by making the same mistake that Sarah made and not trusting that God was going to provide that child for them.
Right, but whether she asked for it or not, we have no way of really knowing because
We
it
do
could have
not.
been his. It could have been his decision because you needed sons to provide for you in your old age.
Right.
And they
Right.
certainly did not look at Abraham and Sarah closely because that did not work out well at all when they did that. So,
No, no, it did not. Not when poor Hagar is got Ishmael laying on her tree saying, I don't want to watch my kid die. That's not a really good way that that story worked out.
no, no.
The other part about Elkanah, and I know I'm picking on poor Elkanah here, right? But he, I love how you took the positive route here, Karen. And you're like, oh, they kept them separate and like there was peace and whatever. And all I see is poor Elkanah. Yeah, someone needed to sit that boy down, right? Because the other thing is, she's bitterly weeping and sad,
Mhm,
right? Because of what Pennon is doing, but not just like Pennon is picking on the sore spot, right? So there's a whole thing going on there, right?
mhm.
One, I would argue he's not being the spiritual leader of his home and telling Pennon to cut it out, right?
Yep, yep.
And so there's a piece of that where he's not doing the role God's called him to do. But worse, he probably says to Hannah the worst possible thing he can say,
Mhm.
worth more to you than 10 sons? Like, no, dude, like how selfish are you? Like
Yep.
you're not that great. Right?
And it's not taking into account and maybe he didn't notice it, I don't know, but it's not taking into account the shame she would have felt
Right. That's what I mean.
because he may not say that God's punishing her, but I bet a lot of people in their community did,
That's right.
and it seems that Peninnah certainly did.
Yeah. Yeah.
God gave
Well,
me kids, God didn't give you any.
yeah. It's kind of like Job, that's what they all did. Like, well, if you're not being blessed by God, where's the sin in your life?
Right,
Like, I'm
right.
sure she was scarlet letter almost. Right?
And then when we look at her prayer, she is so unselfish. It's because she doesn't
Yes.
know that
Yeah.
she'll have more than one child.
Yes.
It's like, "Give me a child, and I'll give him right back to you.
Yeah.
I just need to have a child."
Yes. Right. And she doesn't say dedicate him like we think of like a baby dedication, right?
Right.
Right. Like this was like legit. I'm going to give this child back to you.
Mhm. And it only briefly touches on the Nazirite issue, but no razor will ever touch his head. Well, that's a Nazirite veil. It's for someone who is set aside for a purpose. It can be a lifelong thing or a temporary vow. But a Nazirite has no alcohol, and their whole life is just dedicated to God. So she is like, just take away my shame, and I'll give this child totally to your service.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a complete submission there. And that submission, it's not just in what she says about what she's going to do with Samuel, it's also about what she does with her pain, right? She did what we all say we should do. You should take your burdens and lay them at the feet of the cross, right?
Mhm.
But that's what she actually did, because if you look at verse 10, it says she was deeply distressed. And what did she do? She prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly, right?
Mhm.
She didn't just say, woe is me, and sit in her pity party, right? She
Right.
actually took the concern right to the mercy seat of Christ, which is what we should be doing. And we don't
Mhm.
do very well at all.
Right. And she also has, according to most things that I've read, a different concept of prayer perhaps than people did, because a lot of sources make a big deal of the fact that Eli can't hear her prayer. He judges her by her
Right.
appearance and her attitudes. And people in those days didn't pray silently very often.
Yeah.
They always prayed out loud. And so she's got faith that God can hear her, even though she's not voicing these things out loud. And
Mhm.
so she's exemplary for that reason as well.
She really is. She really is. Well, let's transition over to our dear friend Eli. So I'll go ahead and read from 12 to the end, and we can hop into Eli and her prayer. As she continued praying before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying silently. Only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore, Eli thought she was drunk. So Eli said to her, how long will you make a drunken spectacle of yourself? Put away your wine. But Hannah answered, no, my lord. I am a woman deeply troubled. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation all this time. Then Eli answered, go in peace. The God of Israel grant the petition that you have made to him. And she said, let your servant find favor in your sight. Then the woman went her way and ate and drank with her husband, and her countenance was sad no longer. They rose early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord, and then they went back to their house at Ramah. Elkanah knew his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. In due time, Hannah conceived and bore a son, and she named him Samuel, for she said, I have asked him of the Lord. The man Elkanah and all of his household went up to offer to the Lord yearly sacrifice and pay his vow. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, as soon as the child is weaned, I will bring him, that he may appear in the presence of the Lord and remain there forever. I will offer him as a Nazarite for all time. Her husband Elkanah said to her, do what seems best to you. Wait until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord establish your word. So the woman remained and nursed her son until she weaned him. And when she weaned him, she took him up with her, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine. She brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh, and the child was young. Then they slaughtered the bull and brought the child to Eli. And she said, oh, my Lord, as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who was standing here in your presence praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me the petition that I made of him. Therefore I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is given to the Lord. And they worshiped the Lord there. So what you were just saying is spot on. You got Eli who's looking at her lips, and she's not
Mhm.
praying the way he's expecting her to pray. I saw this image where the way that they are picturing the temple being, because they're not sure if it was a temple or a tabernacle at this point,
Right.
right? So, but in the back right hand corner was a chair, and that's
Mhm.
where he would have been sitting, right? And she's just silently but bawling her heart out to the Lord,
Mhm.
right? And I like to picture being like, what, like enough to get the deaf man's attention, right? Because if she was just sitting here like this, like he probably, I'm picturing him like sitting back, a little dozy. Right? We know
Yeah.
Eli's old at this point, right? So she had to be doing something to catch attention. And Eli does something that we are all susceptible to, and that he judges her form of worship.
Mhm.
And we have a tendency to do that as human beings.
Mhm.
That if your worship doesn't look like I think worship should look like, well, then something's wrong. You
Right.
know, we do that not just interdenominationally, we do it in our own congregations.
Mhm.
Like as simple as, let me ask you, Karen, should your hands be up when you're singing and praising, or should your hands be at your side? Right?
Right.
Don't answer that question. Right. But we get a little picky on how people worship, and
Mhm.
we got a prophet and a priest who's being called out for that exact behavior. And I love that it gets called out here.
And but I also like that when she explains herself, he quickly accepts it,
Yes.
and he quickly offers
Yep.
her blessing and asks God to grant her prayers.
Mhm.
And we also have to give her credit again that even though he judged her so harshly, when he says, "May the God of Israel give what you've asked from him," Hannah felt better.
Yeah.
Hannah trusted that God was really going to give her what she had asked for.
Yeah.
Um, and that's hard for us.
It is.
You
That's
know, we
true
can
faith
pray
right
and
there.
believe that
That
God
is
answers
true
prayer, but is
faith.
God going to answer this one? You know?
Yeah, and how hard is it to have that true faith, right? That I've prayed it,
Mhm.
I'm gonna claim it. And that's faith as a mustard seed. That is faith as
Yeah.
a mustard seed right there. And when you think about that faith as a mustard seed, I always looked at it as being like, we just should have faith this little. But I was listening to a pastor once and they talked about don't focus on the seed, focus on the tree. The faith of the mustard
Mhm.
seed was that you planted it. But that little tiny seed, the roots go so deep that it
Mhm.
draws water when there's a drought, right? And that's where she is. She's in a drought and she's drawing
Mhm.
water. You gotta love that. You've got to love that.
And God comes through.
He sure does.
And Hannah keeps her promise. And I can only imagine how hard it was for her to take Samuel back to Eli. I mean, because Eli was not like Father of the Year.
No,
It
he was not.
mentions it mentions Hophni and Phinehas, and they were not good priests.
No, they were not.
They were not good at all, and so he did not do a really good job with his own kids, and yet she entrusts Eli and God with her child.
That's right. That
'Cause
is
she
right.
has to believe that God's gonna make sure that this all goes well.
Yeah. What I love about that is that she has to like when we talk about like faith that goes deep, like
Mhm,
it didn't stop because I agree with you. Those dudes were whack. They were just messed up
mhm,
dudes. And I like to say all the time that a person's history a lot of times is the best indicator of their future performance,
right,
right? People can change. The
mhm,
Holy Spirit has done amazing things in people. We've both seen it, right? You got to really want it, right? And there's no indication in this story that Eli really wanted it,
no,
right? And that's the part I'm kind of like picking into, right? Because I agree with you on that. And she must have really been aware of just how deep that separation was going to feel because she didn't go for 3 years
right,
back to worship.
right,
And it says she went every year knowing the anguish she was going to be under.
mhm,
So that means that 3 years was super important.
right,
And so, yes, they weaned later than,
mhm,
we would wean now, right? But there's also in Hebrew poetry, 3 is a sense of completion.
right,
So when you have that 3 years, there's a completion where she's like, "Okay, I got my time with him, but I made a
mhm,
promise, and my time
mhm,
has completed. It's
right.
now time for me to hand him off." I don't know how a mom does it. I don't. I watch my wife with my girls. There's a reason they call them mama bears.
Mm.
You mess with my kids, mama bear's coming out.
And Hannah stayed involved in in Samuel's life
Hmm.
because it tells us further, in chapter 2 that they continued to go every year
Hmm.
to worship, and every year she would bring him a little robe, which apparently could also be in a blanket, but she brought him this item,
Yeah.
uh, that both showed her life and served her love and served a practical purpose,
Hmm.
and I'm sure that they spent time with him at that point and shared what he was doing and, all those stories, and um, so it's not like she dropped him off and that was the end of it.
Yeah.
She stayed involved in his life.
Well, and Eli, to his credit, blesses her. Right? He gives her
Right.
another blessing. And two, if we read 18 to 21, which is what you were just referring to, it says Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy wearing a linen ephod, which is what the priest wore. That's a side note for everybody watching the podcast. His mother used to make for him a little robe and take it to him each year when she would up to her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. Then Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, "May the Lord repay you with children by this woman for the loan that she made to the Lord." And then they would return to their home. And the Lord took note of Hannah, and she conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters. And the boy Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. So the blessing didn't stop there. Her obedience brought further blessing. And so when you look at Hannah, there's such a great ex- way of seeing the way we should be interacting as believers. She's in the middle of a dark time and she doesn't
Mhm.
wallow in the dark. She doesn't say, God didn't do for me. She takes the pain to God and turns it over.
Right, right.
Right.
And
Then, okay, so we're going to forgive Eli for his transgression and calling her drunk
mhm,
and maybe worse. Right. Uh, but what does he do? He speaks life into her. And I think that's
mhm,
another thing that God's telling us to do is that as believers, when people share their pain with us, we're supposed to speak life into them. That's why like it says that our tongues can do a lot of good or a lot of damage. But then she follows it up with obedience, and that obedience brought further blessing. So I mean, this is a multi-decade journey that the
mhm.
Bible distills down into 2 chapters,
Right,
but
right.
so much. And this is why I love that we're going to be doing these stories of the women of the Bible, because there is
Mhm.
so much that these women teach us that so many times we gloss over. It's so much more fun to talk about David and Goliath and the lion's den and all these great stories of the men of the Bible who went out with their swords. And I mean, I'll tell you, as a little boy, I would have wanted to hear about, like, yeah, I'm going to take that slingshot. I'm going to get that giant, right? That's what I
Yeah.
wanted to hear, right? But there's so much that these women teach us. And I think it does 2 things. It teaches us, one, God truly meant women to be a helpmate and teach men how to really be, right? I had somebody tell me once that if you really look at the Hebrew word for helpmate there, it's talking about how God like is a helpmate to Israel. Like, and they're like,
Mhm.
it's not secondary, right?
Right.
It's the two actually make and that's why two become one flesh. And that's how they
Mhm.
become the image of God, right?
Right.
So you got to have the other one. But then the second thing is when you look at these women, it shows you how you don't always have to be full of testosterone and fighting the
Mhm.
battles to win the war,
Right.
right? God uses the quiet. And I really appreciate that we're going to do this. I think there's going to be so much we're going to learn from these women. So,
And we don't have time to go into it, but we should at least mention that Hannah, at the end of this chapter, she prays a song, and it's a song of
yes.
praise. And her prayer is the basis for Mary's Magnificat. And a lot of us are more familiar with when Mary says it than when Hannah does, but there are so many um, spots where Mary almost completely quotes Hannah, and the spirit of it is
Yeah.
entirely in that same vein.
It, it's such a beautiful story, the story of Hannah. Now, not how it starts. Like, that's horrible. Like, but the way that it ends, and she didn't go the way of Job. He ended up good too, right? So, but her story is so great. I believe it teaches us so much about, one, what we're supposed to do with our pain. Two, just how boldly we're supposed to come before the throne of grace. That's what it
Mhm.
says in Hebrews. Come boldly. And she did. She came boldly. It teaches us that we can't judge others when they're willing to be bold, right?
Right.
Maybe that's the time we need to hold a mirror up and say, why can't I be just as bold? And then to your point, when God comes through, don't just walk away saying, yay, the vending machine popped out the candy I wanted, right? Go back and praise.
Mhm. Mhm. And Hannah was bold, but she was also humble,
Yeah.
and that's a line we have to
Yeah.
walk, and it's not always the easiest one, um, 'cause she didn't make a big deal about her faith. She didn't we'd have no stories of how she went and rubbed it in Peninnah's face, you know? Like, "Look here." Um, and so it's a line that we all have to walk, to be both humble and bold, and it's not easy all the time.
So just as an aside, I'm going to give you the Pastor Karen Trump question for the day, right?
Oh,
Because
dear.
I love these. If Hannah had 6 children, that's what Scripture tells us. How old do you think Hannah was when she had that last child?
Oh, heavens. Well, hopefully not as old as Sarah, but older than most of us would want to have children.
Right. So that means God also granted her patience and grace and all kinds of other stuff.
Of course, we don't know how old she was when this started,
We don't. And they did
but
marry a lot younger than we would consider women marrying.
I still think she had to be, you know, pushing that age where we're done with babies.
And Peninnah's kids, I mean, some of them were probably full grown adults when that youngest one was born,
Probably,
right?
probably.
Like this is This is quite an interesting story when you look at that one minor little detail.
And you have to wonder, and this has nothing to do with the scripture, but how did this change their relationship? Did Hannah and Peninnah bond over these children, or did it stay just as contentious?
We never know.
Never will. But my
So,
mind always asks questions that I can't answer. So
well, I like to call that my Post-it note question. So I always say that I'm going to show up in heaven because I love sticky notes with a bunch of sticky notes. And I'm like, this sticky note, this one's for Hannah. Did you and Peninnah ever get along? I got ones for Peter. I got ones for John and James. Like lots of people we're going to get in sticky notes.
she'll get to heaven and it just won't matter anymore.
uh,
Or you'll just know.
I'll just know. I don't know. I don't know. I want to think like they're color coded. I mean, like that's great.
God, don't mess up my organizational system, huh?
That's right. That's right.
I've worked on this my whole life.
Oh, there is a place in heaven for type A people. That's all I have to say. Well, everybody at home, thank you for joining us again as we go through uh, all of these women in the Bible. Next week is Sarah. So it'll be fun to go and actually move backwards in the timeline a little bit. And we'll talk about Sarah. So have a great week and we'll see you in a few days. Bye bye.
Thank you.